Welcome to the Worldshapers, conversations with authors about their latest books. I'm your host, Edward Willett, and this episode's guest, Lyn McGinnis, talking about Anu Awake Series Book 2, Amarel Mountain. Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Worldshapers, the podcast where I talk to authors about their books. I am myself an author. My name is Edward Willett. As you can see, it's right over there. There it is, down there. And my last novel is from Daw Books. It was The Tangled Stars. Came out in 2022. It's a far future outer space adventure featuring an AI-uplifted talking cat who becomes a starship captain. And yes, it is humorous. I am also a publisher. My publishing company is also kind of cat-related because it's named after our black Siberian cat, Shadowpaw. It's Shadowpaw Press. It's a traditional publishing company, and I have an aggressive publishing schedule, to say the least, this year. I've already had 3 books out this year, which I am now going to mention to you. Let's see. Off the top of the heap here, we have The Headmasters. He was a guest. Mark Morton, the author, was a guest on the podcast a little while ago. It's a young adult dystopian science fiction novel set in northern Ontario in a few years' time after an accident at a research facility brings in from somewhere these alien parasites that attach themselves to people there. And it's about the effort to rid themselves of these things. Then there was this one, which also came out back in January now. It's The Good Soldier by Nir Yaniv. This is, think of it as MASH in outer space or Catch-22 meets Starship Troopers. It is military science fiction satire set in a world very much like Starship Troopers, but not. So I highly recommend that one as well. And then, more closely related to the podcast, although both, again, Nir Yaniv, like Mark Morton, has been a guest on the podcast this year, we have this one, Shapers of Worlds Volume 4. This is the latest in the anthology series featuring guests of this podcast. And if I put on my glasses so I can read it, this one has stories by David Boop, Michael Brent Collings, Roy M. Griffiths, Sarah A. Hoyt, Sherry Lynn Kenyon, Noah Lemelson, Edward M. Lerner, David Liss, Gail Z. Martin, Joshua Palmatier, Richard Paolinelli, Jean-Louis Trudel, James Van Pelt, Garen Whited, James Kennedy, Mark Leslie, R.S. Millett, Lavi Tidhar, and some guy named Edward Willett. And it's all illustrated by Wendy Nordell. Sorry, I quit talking because I was looking for a good picture to show here off the top here. Let's see. Because, and the reason I'm showing this artwork this time, that's for James Kennedy's book, story, Advent. The reason I'm showing that is because Wendy will also be illustrating Shapers of Worlds Volume 5. And the reason I mentioned Shapers of Worlds Volume 5 is that the Kickstarter for it will be launching on April 9th. So this podcast, this episode is going live on Easter Sunday on March 31st. And about 10 days after that, the Kickstarter will launch for Shapers of Worlds Volume 5. I will be mentioning it going forward on this podcast. But if you'd like to check it out, go to Kickstarter, look up Shapers of Worlds Volume 5. Or you can go to tinyurl.com/Shapers of Worlds 5, numeral 5. And that's just a little easier to remember than the long Kickstarter URL for the campaign. But if you go there now, you'll see the pre-launch page and you can sign up to be a follower. And then you'll be notified on April 9th when it goes live. So that's one of the big spring things coming up. Another one that I really want to mention before we go any further is this book, coming out on May 7th from my Shadowpaw Press. This is a name you might recognize, Robert J. Sawyer. This is his latest novel, The Downloaded, his 25th, I believe. And it came out as an Audible original with a A-list cast that includes Brendan Fraser, for example. And it's been out in audio for a while now, but as that period of exclusivity ends, Shadowpaw Press has the North American print rights. And so The Downloaded will be launched May 7th, that's when it releases from Shadowpaw Press, and it'll be launched in Calgary at the main branch of the Calgary Public Library. Rob Sawyer will be there. Dr. Robert Runte will be there because another book that I'm publishing is a posthumous novel by the late great Canadian science fiction fantasy author Dave Duncan. It's called The Trader's Son, one of 2 Dave Duncan novels I'll be publishing this summer, but this is the first one. And it comes out concurrent with The Downloaded, and so there's going to be a joint launch of those 2 books at the Calgary Public Library on that night. So Dr. Robert Runte, who edited the Dave Duncan book, will be there. Robert J. Sawyer will be there. They're calling it a night of Canadian science fiction. And I will be there. I'll be there waving the flag for Shadowpaw Press. So if you're in the Calgary area, please come to that. I think you have to, well, they would like you to pre-register on the Calgary Public Library website. So if you're interested, it would be great to see you there that night. And of course, both those books are now available for pre-order everywhere. And I hope you'll check them out. Okay. That's probably enough about me. So, and let me put on my reading glasses so I can tell you about our guest, Lyn McGinnis. Now, Lyn focuses very much on the work you'll see in the interview. And so I thought maybe the best introduction is what Lyn wrote for the biography that appears on the Amazon page. So this is Lyn's words. I live in Canada, and my first 66 years have included extensive exploration, education, reading, and traveling worldwide. The early stirrings of this world came partly from reading such fantasy and sci-fi classics as Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, Herbert's Dune, and Asimov's Foundation. All this informs my personal utopia epic fantasy series, which we'll be talking about. Other aspects include being a member of the LGBTQ community and bringing subtle elements of my life into my work. So, that's Lyn. And let's meet Lyn now.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, I always like to start these things by taking people, as I usually say, back into the mists of time. And actually, just before we started, we were talking about just how far back the mists of times were for both of us. But tell me, your general story of growing up and how you got interested in writing and how this... We're going to be talking about this projected 8-book series that you're working on with 2 books out now. But
That's right.
You probably started as a reader, I'm guessing.
I certainly started as a reader, and I grew up in a reading household. It was very common. Books were everywhere. My father actually was a very avid science fiction reader, and at that time, Robert Heinlein was the big name at the time, and among others. But I have to say that also, what you see behind me is my earlier creative output. I started off as an artist. I started off having images sort of manifest and creating them, and eventually painting. And I did a lot of painting, which is now most of it's incorporated onto the A New Awake series website, and is because that's where it's from. This is one story for me that has been growing for decades, and even though these are separate novels and they take place over long periods of time between each, so it's different sets of characters, in a way for me it feels like one big story. It's about this planet, and it's about this creation that the inhabitants of the planet make to make the world better for themselves. But I certainly read a lot of stuff. I also part of my creative output, it came because I also had a very happy child until I went to school, and then I had a terrible time and was pretty miserable. And so I sort of delved inward, and that sort of helped to intensify the growth of this place. Initially, I didn't know what was going on. It really, as a teenager, I first finally had a really solid image of this planet that I'm working on. But certainly, I mean, my big 3 authors who really set the beginning of this journey were J.R.R. Tolkien, Isaac Asimov, and Frank Herbert.
Oh, yes.
That's the Lord of the Rings, the Foundation series specifically, and the Dune series. They're very different stories. And they all seemed to, they're all very broad. The world is the setting is very large. And it's an epic. They're epic proportions. There are multiple characters that are drawn forward by forces beyond just their own personalities. And this had a sort of answering call inside me. I felt something reverberate inside me, like there was something in there that was responding to these things. But I didn't have a clue what to do about that. But what I ended up doing is I am somebody who gets images and ideas and stuff that just appear. Certainly when I'm writing, that happens all the time. I'll be writing something and all of a sudden something comes. And it can be fairly can be quite detailed, although I can go back and refine it. I got those things and I started writing them down. And it started off sort of like a hobby. I didn't tell anybody because I didn't have anything to show them. It was just all these cue cards with stuff written on them. Originally, I have this whole set of little boxes full of cue cards, and I wrote longhand. I typed, and then I would take it out and I would white it out, and I would cut it and paste it and put it back and type it all again. And I was very, very, very pleased with the personal computer revolution. That was very helpful. A huge labor-saving process, but it started off as art because I didn't have initially the words, but I had the images and I had the feeling there was something there, and it was growing. And I'm jumping ahead, but I must say you've had a couple of guests who I've had a particular interest in. One of them was Orson Scott Card. There was one day where I was in the library and there was this book, How to Write Science Fiction.
Yep.
A little white, thin.
I think I may have it on my bookshelf over here.
And he wrote a series of them. How to do plot.
I certainly have one of them at least.
I'm sorry?
I certainly have one of those Writer's Digest books that he wrote.
And they were like keys that I took them and they just unlocked doors that previously I maybe didn't even know they were there. Just hadn't quite made the connection as to how to translate all of this material into narrative and into structure. And then it was like I was opening doors in a dike and just flowed out. So the first novel I wrote is going to be the end of this series. 800,000 words.
Oh,
just absolutely pulled out as this monstrous, huge thing, but it's still going to be in there. But that's the one I tried to sell to agents, and I didn't find out till later that there's no way anybody was going to be interested in an unknown author with an 800,000 word monstrous tome.
No, that's definitely pushing it.
I didn't know. I still was a babe in the woods in this.
Did you write any other things? Like, did you ever try short stories along the way as you were developing into a writer? Or was it always this one project that really?
It really is always this one project. I went to journalism school.
So did I.
Yes, but I didn't have too much opportunity to be a reporter. I tried, and that was I blame part of it on it was at the beginning of the demise of small papers, which has been a long decline and is still happening. So I was an excellent. I found it was a huge benefit in really toning up my writing facility, so that it's like second nature now, and it serves me very well. The people who had the worst time in journalism class were English majors, because they had to unlearn all sorts of things they thought they knew, and I think they were better for it as well. I thought it was an excellent preparation.
I never took. I took one creative writing course. Is the only formal creative writing course I took in university, but I was a journalism major, art minor, so we have that in common. I guess the art side of things. But once I got in, because for 8 years I worked at a weekly newspaper, at first as a reporter, photographer, and then as the editor. At the ripe old age of 24, I was news editor of the newspaper. And I found it was just that fact that, you don't wait. You have to have that text that has to be in the paper. And I think that's a huge benefit for making you able to sit down at a keyboard and produce something.
Well, it allows you also have to you also edit yourself, because you get used to being edited and having stuff with the red pen.
Yeah, those days it really was a red pen on paper.
It was. I had that too. So both at school and at my short stints in papers, you just let that roll off your back and learn from it, and I did. I really disabused myself of the idea that every word was precious, and I got used to seeing that other people saw things that I needed to see, and that was very helpful.
That's a very helpful skill, is to not latch on to your text as holy writ.
Your babies.
Yeah. So when did you actually start the writing of all this? Like really
Well,
focusing that first novel?
that first novel would be like over almost 15 years ago. I first started with that after reading those books, the F. Scar book. And then what I did is and initially another one of your guests, Robert Sawyer, at the time, we're early 90s, I suppose. I read a lot of his stuff and was quite a fan. And he had a section on his site. I don't know if he still does, but he had a section on his site on how to get published. Because very kindly he says, don't send me your manuscript. I'm not going to look at all your stuff, but here's what you need to do. And it was all about finding a literary agent and preferably finding a literary agent and or directly approaching a publishing house. And the information I had that time is for fantasy, which was specifically what I wanted to promote. There were two big collections of English publishing, and that was in New York and London. Mm-hmm. And at the time when I first started trying to do this, there were publications came out called Writer's Market. These big, thick books that were.
I got them every year for a while.
Yeah, and I did too. And then they stopped. They stopped publishing because that was also the time everything was changing. It was right on the cusp of the ebook, revolution. But I went through the process of shopping around, looking at both American and British literary agents, and I did all the right things. I would type up the number of pages they wanted, and the font they wanted, and the leading and spacing they wanted, and include this and include that, and of course the self-addressed stamped envelope, and send it off, and then would wait and wait and wait until finally I got back a little card that says, I'm not the agent for you. Bye.
Yeah.
And
the good old days.
Yes, right. Well, and there's pros and cons to everything. So I could have kept doing that on and on. The one thing I really didn't appreciate was how absolutely huffy they were about the idea that you could possibly have the audacity to send an query to more than one agent at a time. Mm. And this is such a waste of our time. If we decide in here you're already dealing with someone else, but it just drew the whole process out a great deal. I didn't want to rock the boat, but finally it dawned on me that the thing I was trying to peddle was unworkable, at least in its form, at least as a first novel. And so what I realized, I'd had numerous people read it. And I got very good feedback, but one person in particular said, you read this and there's all these, it's another world with all sorts of things happening, but it seems everything has a historical reference back to something else. And the reason for that is that I had, back before I had started writing novels, I had constructed a timeline, which is hundreds of pages long, in brief form, but it still lists. I envisioned so much of the events that happened.
That's very Tolkien-esque.
Yeah, that's right. I was talking with someone the other day, and I said I wrote my Silmarillion first, and then I wrote that because I was
technically so did he.
Yeah, that's true. It's true, but that's true. Eventually, he tried to put it into book form and publish it, and his son finished that for him. And I remember running out and getting it when it first came out in the 70s, I think. Yes, that's right. So then the novel I wrote was set right at the very end. It was like in the present day. And there was so much that had happened before, and I constantly felt like I had to bring that in because it made what was going on now make sense. So what I've been doing since is I've been writing the other 7 novels. And the reason I did it like that is the last thing that works for me is having somebody look over my shoulder. I preferred to spend the time writing a lot before I try just get first thing published. Then I can work at my own pace. As I say, the next novel, Dallinan to Emergence, I can tell you the title. I've already designed the cover. I've got work to do on it, but I'm not going to abide anybody sitting there drumming their fingers. I work at my own pace. I have a very disciplined schedule. I'm up very early in the morning, and I'm writing every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And again, I'm working on things throughout the day, but I didn't want the pressure, external pressure of having people waiting on me. That doesn't work for me. So I have been writing novels that some people are seeing them now ahead of them being published, but I consciously chose to wait until I had enough of a buffer of material that's close to ready or almost ready, so that then I have 2 novels still that I more or less have to write from scratch. They're like novels 5 and 6. 3 and 4 are written, but I'm going to revise them, and that's another. But that's okay. That's doable in a relatively short time frame. But
Okay.
I felt that.
Let's perhaps this is a good place to give an overall view of the story. And as you know, I know it's very, very long, so it's brief and to the point. But what's the overall story here?
Okay, this is very hard to summarize, but I will try to do my best here. What we're dealing with is the planet Anu, ANU, that orbits a sun, which is NU, so it's like Anu is the child of this sun. And the sun is actually very important. It has a big role later. And on this planet, sentient beings have developed, and over a long period of time, which is only briefly alluded to, and it's more on the website, they have discovered that all of their attempts to build a good life and a workable life are always sabotaged and always destroyed, and they always end up having to start from scratch. And they identify the problem as something that they term self-absorption. And this is selfishness, greed, the usual suspects.
Mm-hmm.
But what they have the ability to do in this universe is they can, through various means, enter into the fabric of life and change it. And so what they do is they create over a long period of time an entire new layer over top of the existing life, which they call raw life, which is like nature. And it's called Tatchlan. I don't remember where that word came from. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff which you may want to ask about circles of 8, about doubles, about various things that come up. And some of that, it's way in my past, and it's I'm sure it's one of those things that sort of bubbled up, but I've had it for so long, I'm not certain of its origins. The Tatchlan system is meant to, it helps to modify all of life, but it also is primarily there to control the impulses towards destroying a community life. And so as a result of that, you have a society which is made up of the basic social unit or circles of 8, which is 8 individuals, 6 males, 2 females. They live in clusters, which are groups of, the smallest is like 8 circles of 8. Within those clusters are special beings that are born that have various distinct abilities, which further help to create this unique environment and further it so that it's a utopian. I mean, this is my vision of a utopia. Mm-hmm. And then over all of that, there is a supreme. So they call it the supreme operant, which is the Majastas, which is a figure who can enter into this Tatchlan system and make large changes and can monitor things and keep everything running. And these beings live a very, very long time. And a lot of the story in my timeline is pretty boring in as much as everything works and everybody's happy and everything's fine. So the novels are set at times where things don't work, where there's transition, where there's change, where there's challenge. And as I say, the sun Nu is going to play a big role in the 4th novel, because it's hinted at in, especially in this 2nd novel, there's actually a reference to what's called the burning blossom. It's a physical phenomenon that happens that Tatchlan has no way of controlling, and it's a challenge they have to meet. So,
well, that brings us to the first 2 novels, which are out.
They are.
When did the first one come out, and what's its title?
It's Heshebear's Challenge. The first novel came out, I think it's 2 years ago now. That is set. The reason that one's set way back. It's way before all of the others. That is there to show the beginning the beginning of when the system first, it's called the quickening. That's when the system first wakes up. And because there's right away, things go wrong. And one aspect within Tatchlan are these 12 large sort of manifestations that are used in helping to monitor the system. And one of them sort of malfunctions. And her name is Heshavira. And she doesn't like, she's sort of the eldest in the sense that she's sort of most associated with raw life. And she doesn't like this new situation. She doesn't understand it. And she's sort of making trouble. So that's their challenge. But it's all about the start of this whole new regime, which then, as I say, goes on for a very long time. The second novel is about what happens when all of that comes crashing down. There's a event that happens called the Killing Swath, which most of the characters, even almost 1,000 years later, don't really understand what it was, why it happened. But as a result, the one species that were the original species, they were called the Tolku, and then there was this mass die out after this event. The survivors form a couple of two distinct groups on two different continents, and the Swath actually changes them physically. They actually end up being physically different from each other. The one group that you meet in this second novel, the Koru, have evolved into a sort of a mountain dwelling nocturnal species. They become very thick and heavy set, and they actually don't like being outside, certainly not in the daylight. The other group, the Yakku, are up on the northern continent, Thermostal. They become arboreal. They end up living up in the trees. And they do this out of necessity because of a challenge they have to meet, that they all have to meet. And so they're two different hybrids of the original Tolku, who live very different lives, who see things very differently, and end up having a lot of conflict with each other. But when they first meet, after not knowing of each other's existence, they end up producing children who are different to either of them, and they're called the Yelda, and they're actually more like the original Tolku. So those are the various species. What happens in this second novel are various. I think there's four separate narratives that all sort of eventually converge. Very different groups, some Koru, some Yelda, some Yakku, who each are dealing with what it initially looks like unrelated issues that eventually start to dovetail together. And a lot of it has to do with just figuring out who they are and where they come from and what's going to happen in the world to come. So it's very hard to, there's a lot of detail. I appreciate that. And it's drawing on a lot. I took a page out of, a couple, the chapters are all titled by the principal character. That's George R.R. Martin. He did that for Game of Thrones.
Yes.
He would have one principal character who would be the name for each time that set of characters was in play. And I took a page out of Frank Herbert's book in that he sometimes in certainly his earlier novels would put a little paragraph at the beginning of each chapter that would be expository in nature. It would give you a sense of what it is you were about to read, but sort of give it to you as here's the facts about this event that happened. And I hope it helps. I hope it helps with delving into this, because you're really it's a submersive experience. I appreciate that, and I hope that helps.
Can somebody come to the second book without having read the first book?
I really hope they can. Yes, because as I say, it's not a case of continuity of characters. Mm-hmm. But there is continuity as far as the planet, same planet. The Tatchlan system is still there, although it's been changed, but it's still in operation. The Circles of Eight are still there. The Majastas is still there. New one, of course. So the system. So if you could start with the second one, and I hope I have provided sufficient supports in explanations, in small amounts, small doses explanations, and another little explanation, whatever, as well as what's buried within the narrative, to assist in making your way.
Well, after all, everything you read on Earth that's set on Earth is, a distinct story set on the same shared world. So I sometimes think literary fiction is just a form of shared world fantasy. So,
well, yes, I agree. I think it's very interesting how this genre, there's so many people that look down their noses at it. It's all it's all made up, and you're absolutely right.
Fiction is made up. That's kind of the point.
Fiction's made up, but I mean, if you're writing something set in the present day, you don't need to invent elevators and subways. They're already
helpful, yeah.
They're already there, so you can just say, they went to the station, they went down the elevator, and they got on the tube. It's not you've got a lot that's done for you. The reader already knows a lot. It's a lot more challenging to have to explain everything and to do it in the same way, to do it in such a way that doesn't burden someone who wants the story. And I feel very strongly that as much as possible, I keep the story in the present. I keep the timeline as linear as happening, sequentially, and that you don't spend a lot of time rumbling around in people's heads. You are there with the characters, and they are acting and they are vocalizing their thoughts. If I may say one other thing about the writing process, or I don't know, were you going to ask me something about that? I'm sorry, I think I'm jumping ahead here. I think I'm jumping ahead a lot. I beg your pardon.
No, you're covering everything I would probably have talked about. So
okay. For me, and it's also because I've been watching a number of these extraordinary interviews that you have done with really exceptional people. So I guess I've got the script somewhat in my head. For me, the process of the writing, because I've got this build up, like I haven't actually started. I probably next year I'm going to probably start working on the fifth novel. Just barely started. Fifth and sixth novels are the ones that are in their infancy. It's like when I wrote the first novel. I know when I open that door, it's going to come rushing out again. It's like there's this buildup. And whenever I write a chapter, I always know how it's going to be in, and I never know how it's going to be end, because when I start, I'm running with them. I'm running with the characters. I know that there's the plotters and the pantsers, the seat of the pants writing. When it comes to the actual writing, I'm a pantser. I'm running with the characters. We are going forward together. Things are happening, and I'm typing as it's happening. When I go back, completely different. It's like I'm an editor in a film room, and I'm looking through the film. It's like it's different. It's a different part of my brain that's revising. I've had the experience, and now this is the looking back on a home movie of it and saying, well, we're going to cut here, and we're going to revise here, and we're going to say this here. But the writing experience, the original one, is actually quite exhilarating. It's like my brain's sparkling. It's quite it's in a way it's one of the most enlivening moments. It's not painful at all, and I have never looked at a blank page for more than a minute before it starts happening. And part of that is I took so long to get to this point that I have far more than I'll ever get all down on paper. So I'm set. There's so many things that I want to explore. In this novel, there's introducing the concept of a double. And a double is within this cluster system is a woman who during her first pregnancy, it doesn't work. It's a bad pregnancy. And instead, and what happens is relatively soon into this, the baby's sort of like absorbed back into the mother, and the mother becomes a new augmented being. She becomes a double. It doesn't mean there's two people in one body, but that's the term that's used. their blood becomes more enriched. They become a source of healing in and of themselves. And in the secondary epoch, there's been a creation of there's a lot of created creatures that serve this society, and one of them is called a healing vat. Again, I can tell you, healing vat. The whole notion of this living entity that you could literally be submerged in that would help heal all sorts of things. But and then the linking of the two, the double, which had no healing vats during the earlier period, they become bonded. And so what you have in this story is one whole thread, which is just about this young woman bonding with what starts off as an egg and becomes this creature, and her learning the whole process of guiding this creature. And at the end, when she's an old woman and she dies, she is submerged in that, and then that becomes a fully ripened healing vat, and it serves the cluster for a century or two. That's one whole piece that I got to explore and lay out in this.
Well, you certainly have room to explore a lot of things in a series this long. I know you have a copy of the second book there. Can you hold that up? I mean, I will have an image of the
very
art.
Happy to. There you go.
The cover art is yours.
It is. In fact, if you look behind me, you can see the original painting up on the wall there for this. Yes.
So, do you do any interior illustrations since you have so many?
Yeah, I do. Every chapter has a just a moment. Oh boy, every chapter has artwork. Cool. Actually, the ebook and in the ebooks should have the artwork in it as well. And depending on which one you get, I think the iBooks, they're all in color. It depends. I think actually Kindle as well. They're in the original color.
What you lose in ebooks with that sort of thing is that the text doesn't necessarily spread around it the way you want, because the text can be made to any size people want, and all sorts of weird things can happen. But
that's fine.
Tell me about the publishing process then. How did you end up approaching publishing?
I've been very interested in your guests. All of them thus far were able to get a traditional publisher.
I've had a few that weren't traditional.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that yet. Yeah. So
there's 160, so it's not surprising you.
Yeah, no, I haven't quite got through all of them. I did try for a long time, and then this whole ebook thing came out, and by that time I had written several of the books, and I appreciated as I say, there are trade-offs. So there would be benefits to either scenario. What benefits I decided to go for were the ones where I had control over my content. I mean, I worked very hard to make sure that it's readable and there's no egregious errors. But because I'm also the artist for it, I had complete control over the aesthetic of how the book looks and everything. So what I ended up doing is, among other offerings, I went with a company called Book Baby.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them.
And but I also went with I created the EPUB document. I could do that. I have an Apple machine and I could do it. Pages actually allows you just to do that, but it's way too big. I sent it to another company called Book Nook, and they do optimization of the document. And then it's ready for different formats, both for this is a print on demand. You can actually order this wherever you see the book, or many places you can order and get a physical book. And I'm amazed. I thought, well, that's great. But I thought the obituary of the print book had already been written. Meanwhile, I have young people who say, I'm really excited for this, but I want to wait until the real book comes out. And they call this a real book.
Yep. No, my daughter, we started her with a reader, e-reader. She read the first couple of Percy Jackson books on a Kobo, and she regrets that she didn't have the real books for those. And all she does is buy physical books. She doesn't read ebooks at all. I'm the ebook reader because of old eyes and nice bright screens and things, and not having to lug the book around. I quite like it, but
I actually, just so you know, if you ever see the hard copy, I actually have my print actually fairly big. I kind of like that too, but no, as I say, I was just presuming that it would not be as popular, but it is. But so BookNook does does the formatting, which finally goes to BookBaby, and BookBaby, the publisher, does the distribution, and it is quite broad. It goes pretty far and wide. I mean, of course, it hits the big ones, Amazon and Barnes and Noble and iBooks and things like that. And it also covers all sorts of other ones all over, anywhere where English books are published around the world. Little places I'd never heard of, they go there as well. So I'm satisfied with that. The one of the downsides so that's all good. I had a lot of feeling of control. I had a feeling that I was doing this, and I could see the results. I do wish at times, though, that I had the benefit of what I hear from you and from other people you speak to, of having a really professional editor. I've certainly had, and I appreciate that sometimes. I understand sometimes that can be kind of crushing as well. It can, if they're really doing their job, they may well tell you that you've got a lot of work to do. That I can understand that. And also the marketing. The marketing is that you're still on your own.
I mean, marketing, nobody has a handle on marketing as far as I can tell. So
I remember hearing once somebody in, I think, The Guardian complaining that if they go through all the hoops of getting published and having their book available out there, what that means is you get to go into this huge warehouse full, absolutely thousands of these people, and they're all at slot machines, pulling the slots and putting in money and pulling slots, hoping they're going to get a jackpot. It's like, it's still a case. The downside of the ebook revolution is you're one voice among, I mean, you were before, but more so even.
Yeah.
You're one voice among a million. And
that trying to be visible and to stand out is the challenge. And so, and if you do it, you are literally sometimes the person who's hit the jackpot, and you may not even know why. Something takes off and you don't even know what you did, and you can't replicate it next time. Although and it hasn't happened to me, unfortunately, but if you do get something that's really, really big, that does help the next time because people remember they read this really, really big thing. But anyway, we're getting towards the end of our time here.
Oh my, really?
So I just wanted to get a feeling for the reaction you've had now that it's out there. Have you heard from readers? Have you been pleased with the reaction you've received?
I'm very pleased. I have gotten reaction. The one thing that I wish had happened more is I will get people who will say they've loved this and that it's worked for them and they're very happy about it. And I'll say, thank you so much for saying so. Please take a moment to put a comment in. And very few people have done that. It's like, I don't know what it is I need to do to get more comments, because I get comments, but they don't go where other people see them. I see it, and it's very hard. I mean, there's a few, but I've actually gotten a lot of, like, I'm a member of Goodreads, which is a website for authors and readers. I've gotten several quite generous reviews there, which is lovely, and I appreciate it. But I would love to see more feedback on the sites themselves, and it's just going to be a matter of time. I am committed to doing this. I am writing. This is the fulfillment of this vision, this place I've had all my life. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep on pulling that slot machine, and I'm going to look for all the opportunities I can find to, such as this one, which I'm just so pleased about, to just get my head up above water and wave my little flag and do my best. I mean, I think the number one thing I have to do is do the best job I can, and be as clear and as detailed and as fully authentic to this vision, because that's what people are going to end up looking at, and so that has to be right.
Yeah, it ultimately comes back to the book itself and the writing
Well,
itself.
and that I have some control over. I mean, there's a number of things you have control over, and then there's a number of things where we do our best, but there's a lot of chance involved, and it's very difficult, and you just have to. It's all part of it.
I think you've answered the question of what you're working on now. So I guess the final question is, where can people find you online?
This is a complicated answer. There certainly is the main site, anuawakesseries.com, and that's not a social media site. That's a website, and that was originally an outgrowth of my Silmarillion, the appendices, which at one point long ago I was actually envisioning as maybe somehow having a bridge version in the back of each book, but it's way beyond that now. It's an encyclopedia of Anu. Mm-hmm. And I'm very pleased with that. And that's full of this artwork and a great deal more. I've done far more artwork since that is all very dedicated to this. And I like to think that it contributes as well to giving that immersive feel. Other social media, the Facebook is the big one. I was hacked a couple of years ago. My personal page was hacked. It was one of those stupid mistakes which you look back on and think, what? But anyway, I did it. Well, I had created a business page, but with Facebook, that is completely linked to your personal page. So I lost access to that Facebook page as well. So it's just called Anu Awake Series. It's still sitting there. I've been trying to get it down for years. Like my personal page, there's not much left of it. And most people seem to know now it's not legit. But it's still there. I wish that I could get rid of it. I have a new Facebook page, which is Anu Awake's Epic Fantasy Series. It actually has a link on my main page, and I'm very happy.
I will post these links on the Worldshapers website. Thank
you. As I say, you can get to that one off of the main site. It's right on the homepage, and I've toyed with some of the other links, but I mean, I'm not really involved in a lot of the other ones. I absolutely swore off Twitter. I will have nothing to do with Twitter anymore. It's a dumpster fire now. I don't want anything to do with it. Philosophically, as much as personally, I was on it for a while, but I'm not happy with what it's turned into. And there's a few other sites. They're actually all linked at the bottom of my main page. There's at the very bottom, there's a set of links to various things, including Goodreads, which I'm happy with, and a few others. But the Facebook one, I will put updates on it, and I will do things on it. But the one thing people will notice is that the Anu Awake series page isn't about me. It's about the planet. It's about, I think my name's mentioned on the first page, and there's ways you can get in touch with me. There's an email list you can get on. But I'm not so much focusing on me, look at me, and here's a picture of me on every page. I'm talking about the work. This is the one work. This is the one place that I'm writing. And as you can see, it's a very great detail. So that's my focus is on the work. And
well, it's a fine thing to focus on. So.
Well, I hope people think so. Thank you.
So thanks so much for being on the Worldshapers. And as I said, I will post what links you have on the homepage for the Worldshapers when this goes live, which will be, well, of course, people watching it, it's live for them right now. But we're recording it on Good Friday, and it will go live on Easter Sunday, I think. So it'll be very fresh.
Amazing.
So thanks so much for being on, and best of luck with this huge project.
Thank you very, very much. It's been a pleasure.
And thanks again to Lyn McGinnis for being my guest. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did, and I think Lyn enjoyed it as well. I hope so anyway. That's the end of this episode, it's only one, of the Worldshapers. Just a few closing things to remind you that you can find the Worldshapers online at theworldshapers.com, where you will find a page for this interview, which will include an audio-only version, if that's what you prefer, and also some more background information and an image of the book, and those social links that we were talking about. You can also find the Worldshapers on Facebook at the Worldshapers, and you can find it on X/Twitter at the Worldshapers. You can find me at my personal website, edwardwillett.com. You can find me on Facebook at edward.willett. You can find me on X at ewillett. And you can find me on Instagram at edwardwillettauthor. And finally, you can find me right here on YouTube, which may very well be where you're watching this, at youtube.com/edwardwillett. And among other things on this YouTube channel, which I hope you will subscribe to if you haven't. Not only if you subscribe will you get notified about every one of these podcast episodes as they come up, I also do almost daily walks around my home city here of Regina, and you can walk with me as I walk and point my camera at things and talk. So if that interests you, please check out the Walking in Regina playlist. You'll also find some samples of my music, singing and that sort of thing. So please do subscribe if you haven't already here on YouTube. Shadowpaw Press, which I mentioned, is quite easy because it's Shadowpaw Press on Facebook, Shadowpaw Press on Twitter, and shadowpawpress.com is the website. And yeah, I think that probably covers off everything I need to say here at the tail end of this interview. I hope you enjoyed this episode where I was talking to Lyn McGinnis, and I hope you will come back in the future as I continue to talk to authors about their latest books. That's it for this time. Bye for now.